This episode is brought to you by the Adoptee Bookshelf. Welcome to the Adoptee Bookshelf, a resource created by educators and librarians dedicated to reading, reviewing, and promoting quality adoptee literature. Join us by subscribing to our newsletter and get our reviews on books written for and by adoptees and the wider adoptee constellation. Visit theadopteebookshelf.com. This is the Inclusion Conversation. I'm your host, Grace Young Foster, founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. I'm an adoptee, I'm a foster care alum, and I'm passionate about elevating our communities. It's time we're included and visible in the conversations about work, careers, and just life. Let's be visible and let's be loud. Join me now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Inclusion Conversation. I am Grace Young Foster. I'm your host today. I'm the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. And it's just so great to be in community with you all, in this space with you. And I'm really excited about this conversation we're having today. And, Marí is someone that is part of the Guatemalan adoptee group that I've interacted with many times. Ben Fossen's been a guest on my live shows in the past, and he is a board member and one of the founders. And it's just so great to see more and more of us connecting community in this way. And I'm thrilled to have her on the show. And so before we welcome Marí, let me introduce a little bit about her. So Marí Valiente is a librarian, educator, and teacher. She is a social justice educator with experience in the classroom teaching students from pre-K through middle school and adult learners. She's also a contributor at the Adoptee Bookshelf. She is a librarian and an adoptee educator, passionate about educating communities and facilitating conversations around identity and the adoptee identity. When in the classroom or at home, she reviews and evaluates adoptee literature for educators, librarians, and families. Welcome, Marí. Great to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And I love that you mentioned Ben's name. And I believe you've also been in conversation with one of my good friends, Joe, as well. So it feels really good to share space in a space that they've shared with you as well.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, they're amazing. Joe is very amazing.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of things, all things climate and things good for our planet. So I'm really proud of them. And I want them back on the show. To begin our conversation, would love to hear a little bit about how you experience your adoptee identity and what your journey's been like.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a Guatemalan adoptee. I'm a transracial adoptee. I was adopted in 1993, actually 1994, at a year old. I was born in 1993. And I was raised in southern rural Vermont in an all-white town, and I was the only brown child in my town growing up. And I am now an educator and a librarian. And over the past few years, I've connected with Ben and Joe and Adoptees with Guatemalan Roots. And I've since done a reunion with my family, my biological family. And this has all led me on the journey that I'm at now, which is really believing in giving families, teachers, educators, the people who are with kids and adoptees the most, because it's like almost 40 hours a week, right, that kids are in school, the resources that they need to support adoptees in conversations around identity in the classroom or at home as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and it's I don't know how often we sit and think about how many hours our kids are in school. It's almost as many as we're at work.
Mm-hmm. That's a long
And
time.
it's a long time. So it's really important what content they're being introduced to, how they're learning, right? How to express language, how they're learning histories, how they're learning about equity and inclusion and belonging, because they learn so much from their educators. So thank you so much for just dedicating your career at this moment in time to doing that and being there for our youth. As a mom of a young one, I really appreciate it so much, because it's not something that I'm gifted with, and I'm so happy that there are more people with my lived experience doing this. It means a lot.
Yeah, it's really important because in some of the books that I recommend and review, it's very common for an adoptee's identity to come up in the classroom when they're amongst their peers and they're looking at where they belong and where they fit in. So teachers are often the front lines in how to support affirming or giving context to kids who are asking questions to be able to affirm and give language around an adoptee identity in the classroom. And then if a kid goes home with that, right, to you, your little one comes home and then talks about having had that conversation or that moment in school, often the first question the parents ask is like, what did the teacher say? And so teachers and librarians are not only like resources to the kids, but support for the parent as well in navigating these conversations. And not enough teachers, I would say, are trauma informed or aware of the adoptee identity or foster care identity or kinship care and what that means and looks like for a child at home.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to add too that like it's not fair that this is on educators, but it's often the reality that you are also one of maybe the one and only, or one of the very few adults, especially in foster youth lives and some adoptee lives, where you are the stable, the constant, the person who does care about them and outwardly shows it, and you're consistent. There's so much, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, right? But the stories that we get to hear about adoption and foster care is not nearly enough through the lens of the adoptees and the fosters. And so the narratives that are still dominating, it's getting better, but the narratives that are still dominating, right, is this magic world fairy tale story. And it's the end after the home placement or after the adoption occurs. And so many young people that are in the child welfare system go through a lot of trauma afterwards. Not every placement's a good one. Not every family is the right one.
Mhm.
And there's this big cycle of, in and out of homes or just really traumatic events that continue to happen. And so school is an escape. I know for me, it was an escape when I was young. And if it weren't for my teachers, I don't know that I would have strived to be more
Mm.
than what I was told I could be or what I was shown I could be. And so it's really, really meaningful to me that you understand and take it so seriously, and you, from the lived experience perspective, like some of the nuances and challenges for adoptees and foster alums and youth, but also just more on a macro level. You get the whole narratives that are like surrounding us and inside our heads that we keep repeating to ourselves. You're just such a light and force for good for adoptees and foster youth who you have the privilege to educate. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And I'm sorry that there's a weight on you for that, but I'm just so glad that you're a person that takes that on. So that being said, talk to us a little bit about your journey to being an educator and being a librarian, and then would love to hear a little bit more about the Adoptee Bookshelf.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure so many, like if your teachers are out there listening to that, they're celebrating you. And so many teachers that I mean, do talk to, they will have that impact. And still, so many teachers are just still so unaware of the adoptee identity. And they're aware of racial identity and how that takes place in a classroom, but or, gender identity, but they're not as aware of adoptee identity.
Yeah.
And similarly to you and what you've shared, I really struggled as a kid feeling so unseen in my racial identity. I think a lot of my educational journey as a teacher has been to be the teacher that I did not have as a child, and to be the librarian that I did not have as a child, to help adoptive parents or foster communities or foster and adoptive agencies to better support the kids that they weren't able to when I was growing up, because there just weren't the resources, there wasn't the conversation. And so I feel like I tell people I became a teacher because like I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't have, I just felt like back then you were told you could be a police officer, lawyer, teacher, nurse, and there are so many other things
Or
out there.
mom.
Yeah, or mom.
Homemaker. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So right away when I entered the teaching field and learned, especially right now, there's so much conversations around identity in the classroom and racial identity development. I just was hooked. I was so just sunk into it. And then I was like, wait a minute, how does this apply to me? It wasn't actually until I, as a teacher, embraced identity work in my classroom that I was like, wait, I need to do this work myself. And that sparked, my whole identity journey, and, thus reunion. And then I accidentally fell into librarianship. But when I got into the library, it was actually one of my colleagues who suggested evaluating our collection. I work at an incredibly privileged library where we have so many resources. And so they were like, we must have an incredible adoptee literature collection. Like, we just must, right? And so
Yeah.
we went to look at our collection because sometimes families and teachers will come and say, I need books about race. I need books about gender. I need books about, it's, Native American Heritage Month this month. So I need books about Native American Heritage Month. And usually we can like pull piles and piles of books together that are our own voices, that are, child-centered, developmentally appropriate, current, recently published, and for adoptee literature. I'm sure you can guess from Rebecca Wellington's podcast that it is lacking. There's been a big push in the past year or so, but even then, the push this year is less than last year. Like the publishing numbers that I see this year have already decreased a little bit since last year. There's still so few of us. And then reviewing is a big part of being a librarian. There's so many opportunities to review books. People are always asking to review books. And I already have been, as a person who holds so many marginalized identities, was reviewing for children's literature as a woman of color, and found that reviewing is also, I want to say 60 to 70% of white, straight women. And the reviewing is biased towards people of color, or it fails to see the adoptee identity as well. And I think there are a few other, like adoptee reading is a resource that will tell you what's being published, but I don't believe that she includes reviews. If there are reviews out there, she includes them. But there really aren't many adoptee reviewers out there. And so the Adoptee Bookshelf came from seeing so many reviews flowing into my inbox of, this is a great book, this is a great book, and seeing adoptee literature and BIPOC literature that I loved being reviewed by white women negatively. And I was like, how dare you? You don't understand the nuance of that book because you don't have that lived experience to be able to appreciate the value of that book. And that significantly affects publishing and what's going to be published. So it's my little push to try to challenge what's out there right now in terms of librarianship in the review world.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that really hits home. We make these baby steps of progress, like maybe because I'm so entrenched in the adoptee and foster community, like I'm seeing more available, both in kids' books and youth books and adult books from the voices of adoptees and voices of those with lived experience. But you are so right that, yeah, the opportunities to publish and create and get our stories out there from with our voices centered, right? It is still very controlled and limited, and the gatekeeping is still pretty intense. Right? I'm starting to process how much work we still have to do to break through those barriers. And so the Adoptee Bookshelf, you are doing so much heavy lifting, just curating. Like you're literally just curating all these works into a place where people can know about it and find it and hear about it and be educated. That's amazing. That's amazing. How many are there of you, of contributors?
Thank you. Well, actually, the funny thing about this is that I agreed to do this podcast and I am the sole contributor. I've
Oh,
created
you
this
are.
platform and I have really been like keeping the site hush hush because I've been trying to just backload the site full of everything that my colleague and I, Catalina Ellis, I have to give her a huge shout out. She's also a transracial adoptee. We have been presenting on this topic like very much in independent schools right now. So we've done different presentations at the National Association of Peoples of Color Conference. We've done some presentations for the Adoptee Knowledge Affiliates Conference, the California Adoption Conference, and really just trying to get these books out there. And even, we joke that sometimes in our therapist's office, or we'll see, people put these resources out there, but they haven't vetted some of them.
Yeah.
And, even stories that are written by adoptees or adoptive parents or, siblings of adoptees just need to be critically evaluated. And then also there needs to be intent in how do I use this resource with children and that
Yes.
extra step. And so she's a mom, she's a single mom. And so we do this work together, but I don't have children. I have a dog. And so right now I've been just backloading the site and I wanted to share it here with you because I wanted it to be a space to be able to say like, this is fluid and changing, and I'm so inspired by you and what you've done here with the Inclusion Initiative, because I remember when you were in conversation with Ben and Joe and just seeing the growth and change, and I feel like
Thank you.
I want to I'm inspired by you, right? To just put it out there and say, this is here, this is out there, and like, come talk to me. I want to hear feedback. I want to partner with people. I want to continue to make it adoptee centered in the way that you do.
Oh, I'm honored. I'm honored. And this is exactly why we do this, so that we can amplify and just like the whole point of the Inclusion Initiative is so that we empower each other. We amplify and we empower because ain't nobody else going to do it for us.
No.
So it's time to come
Mhm.
together and do this collectively. You made me so proud just now and so grateful to be in this community with you. And I'm so glad that you are moving forward with this really incredible platform, doing the needed work to help, the me when I was 10, 8,
Mhm.
12, 18, even young adult, I needed these things. I never saw myself in any of these stories or literature or histories. So it's fantastic. And I wanted to ask you a very specific question then. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but how can librarians then, in your experience, be a resource for an adoptee in, their environment, whether it's work or school or whatever?
Yeah, so I'm a school librarian, but there are all different types of librarians out there. And public librarians, I mean, they work wonders, and their job, our job, are to be resources and to help people find the resources they need. So we have families that come into the library and say, right, we have adoptees. All of us have adoptees and foster youth in our school communities. So we have families come in and say, I need help. Help me. What do I do? And so we try our best to, whip out the resources around adoptee competent therapists, trauma-informed therapists. We try to connect of course, the literature for the children and the literature for the adults. We also do digital resources and research. So, even if we don't know the answer, our job is to be skilled at putting in the keywords in the database, in Google search, and come out with some resources for families. But I believe teachers and librarians, but especially teachers, that's why it's so important that they're trauma informed, because teachers can be the bridge or the liaison with the therapist, with the, IEP team, with the administration, right? As people are seeking to understand a kid and their behavior, oftentimes, adoptee behaviors can present in all different ways, right? And so oftentimes being adopted and experiencing trauma is overlooked, right? Oftentimes people are like, oh yeah, that's part of identity, but like, let's put that over there. And we're so quick to diagnose with ADD or ADHD or say they need medication or this or that or the other thing, without looking through a critical lens of an adoptee identity. And so I think librarians can just work wonders in terms of finding science-based, evidence-based, research-based information for parents and families, as well as help break things down in a child-friendly, developmentally appropriate language. So both of those things.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And from the way you're talking about it and talking about your peers in the space, it sounds like they would love for you to lean on them for those resources. They would love to help you in that way.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Librarians love to help.
So people go talk to your librarians.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Your
Your
wealth
public
of knowledge.
library. Yes, your public library. I save so much money on books. Like that's just another side note, but like save money on books. Go support your public library.
Yay, I love that plug. I love that plug. So what is a key takeaway that you want our allies to hear from you?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, all of this literature at the Adoptee Bookshelf really seeks to be encompassing of the adoptee constellation of foster youth, of kinship care, of language to support children and families. And so I really think that a book can be healing for an adoptee, but especially for a parent who doesn't know what to say, or the gut reaction when their child asks, did my birth mom not want me? Right? That parent could read. There are so many different books out there that respond to that question, or the family tree assignment. There's not, sorry, I'm exaggerating. There are not so many, but there are starting to be on the Adoptee Bookshelf. My goal is that families can go there and find so many different narratives addressing that question in so many different ways that are all affirming and appropriate and empowering for an adoptee, so that they can figure out, oh, how am I going to answer this question when my adoptee inevitably asks me that question? And to be open to asking for help. I think that we're not willing to be vulnerable, and they need to ask for help.
Yes. We as adoptees don't like to ask for help, but our
Mhm.
allies also have trouble asking for help. Yeah. So it kind of eases the uncomfortableness a little bit when you realize like both parties all involved in the ecosystem of adoption and foster care, like we all kind of struggle asking for help, so let's just ask. I love that. Thank you for that insight and wisdom. I love that piece of advice for allies. We're going to pivot into our rapid fire questions in a minute. But just to close out our conversation about the Adoptee Bookshelf, how do you need support? How do you want to be amplified? What would help you grow this initiative? It's so important, the work you're doing, amplifying everybody else, but we need to amplify you and what you're doing. So how can we do that?
Oh, well, that's so kind and so thoughtful. And so I'm really trying to launch at the date of this podcast, of like when this podcast launches. So I think just going to the website and subscribing. So if you subscribe to the newsletter, anytime a review is posted, it will go directly to your inbox. And that right there is just like, for me, it's pretty easy to skim of like, this is a book that I need, like buy it or skip it, borrow it, and then to share with especially educators in your child's life or fellow librarians. This is really a resource for parents or families. And so anyone who is touched by adoptee or foster care or kinship care, I hope will find this resource helpful.
Great. I'm on it. Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay. Are you ready to transition to rapid fire? These are fun, I promise.
Yes.
Okay. So just say the first thing that's on your mind. Don't overthink it.
Okay.
Okay, ready? Favorite food?
Ooh, pizza.
Yeah. That's been multiple answers. Okay. What is your superpower as an adoptee?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if it's a superpower or like my downfall would be like just empathy and like just wanting to, I know it's like people pleasing and caring so much about other people, but empathy was the first word that came to mind.
Yeah, that's a good one. What did you dream of doing when you were a kid?
Well, you know what? When I was younger, I actually wanted to be a vet and then saw what vets do and was like, nope.
Yeah, that was a hard pivot there. Aw, but now you have a pet, so you do need
Now
vets. So thank
I
goodness
just
for
love
vets.
animals. So that was the drive behind that one. But
What's one thing on your bucket list?
oh, wow. Well, I am so inspired by you with this podcast that my mom is a survivor of the Guatemalan genocide and civil war. And so, and all of our adoption stories are not quite, or my adoption story is not quite what was told to me when I was growing up. And so my goal is to someday just really spend as much time with her as I can to record all of her stories. And even if it's like lullabies or, what are the stories that she was told growing up? Just to capture all of that, all the things that I didn't have from her growing up to have now. That's my
Yeah,
bucket list to do.
that is so beautiful. A lot of people are like, go to Fiji or, something like that. Yours is like preserving legacy, which I really appreciate that. It's wonderful.
That I mean, I would say just to contextualize that more, that's very much I'm in a transition phase right now with everything going on in the world. And Guatemala has been calling me for a long time. And so I really believe in this phrase, this quote from Dr. Goldie Muhammad, who's an educator, who says, we need to know who we are and whose we are. So that is just my theme right now. That's what I'm living, breathing, sleeping,
Wow.
all of that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what is one piece of advice that you'd want to share with our audience? I guess especially our adoptee and foster audience.
Go out there and, ask for what you need. Go after like what you're doing, what I'm trying to do, like just going out there and doing it and then asking for what you need because we're here now. Like I want to say our generation is trying to be the mentors or trying to be the adults who are nurturing and helping raising the children of the next generation. And so,
Yeah.
we may not, I didn't have that, but when the kids ask, like, or not even, I really try to give, especially the adoptees in my community, the little adoptees.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for being on our show. Thank you again for all of the work you're doing to amplify adoptee and foster voices, centering the lived experience. I just can't thank you enough. And everyone, please support the adopteebookshelf.com. It is really a beautiful website. And you can support in all the ways that Marí mentioned. Plus, I'm sure she would take some sponsorships and some financial support too. So consider that as well. And please, if you like the show, follow us, give us a review and rating. And all of the information will be listed on our show notes. I'm Grace Young Foster, and this is The Inclusion Conversation. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, share, and follow us. Check out our show notes to know where to find us on social, and our website is theinclusioninitiative.com. If you're an adoptee of color or a foster care alum, and you want to join our professional community, it's free, by the way, hit me up via DM, or you can find our email in the show notes. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.